You're watching The Public Interest, a weekly program produced by the Ministry of the Presidency that allows for the media to interact with the President. As always, we have with us President David Granger. Welcome, sir.
Thank you, Wendy.
And joining us today is Stacy Carmichael-James from the newsroom. Good to have you back, Stacy.
Nice being here.
And from the National Communications Network, Norman Gobin. Welcome, Norman.
Thank you. Great to be here.
Our main topic for this week is youth employment and entrepreneurship for economic development. Mr. President, on Monday, we saw the transformative nature of giving young people a second chance and to become their own boss and to become empowered and to even have an opportunity to further their studies. The Sustainable Livelihood Entrepreneurship Program, the SLED program, is one of many programs designed to create employment for young people. Sir, can you describe your administration's overall policy for job creation in an environment where undereducation among the youth demographic is common?
Well, the whole idea, as you said, is to give young people a second opportunity, but in many instances, it's the first opportunity they've had since they left school to go into the world of work. And I was very encouraged by the testimonies of at least two women. One was the beneficiary of an amnesty. She was actually in jail, Jail, and another was in NOC. But here they saw that the opportunity provided by SLED was one that opened new frontiers for them in terms of a career. That is the policy of government. I've said over and over again that we want to encourage, we want to create the environment, we want to provide the facilities for young people to be employed, self-employed. I've said before, and I don't apologize for it, that I don't expect to see a nation of young people expecting to be employed in the army or the police force, but the government has a role, and the government is committed to providing opportunities. And first, through SLED, secondly, through the Hinterland Employment Youth Scheme, HEYS, third, by LEND, the Linden Enterprise Network, and I hope that every single town, not only Linden, but Mabaruma, Bartica, Lethem, New Amsterdam, could have schemes by which young people could access credit, access training, and set up their own businesses. I see an entrepreneurial country. I see young people being prepared to be their own bosses. And this is exactly what the government wants to see. And Monday's launch of SLED was a demonstration of government in action. And I was very encouraged by the responsiveness of young people. Some of them were not so young, but I think the entire exercise was one which gave other young people hope. And I would like to see in the next year's budget the scheme being extended to other regions and expanded in terms of its capacity to get more young people on board.
Thank you, sir. Norman?
Yes, I would like to just shift focus a little bit. It's
Sure.
roughly in the same area. So right now, most of the world has entered the age of technological advancement. A lot of emphasis is being placed on research and development, engineering, programming, creative freedom. And I shouldn't have to tell you that in this day and age, ideas are a priceless resource. And what are the government's plans for ushering Guyana into this new age of innovation and to integrate modern technological solutions to help improve everyday life of the average Guyanese?
Well, to start with, you see, at the beginning of this year, we established a Ministry of Public Telecommunication, and I think that's a start. We are going to embark on a program of giving more laptops to teachers when they enter Sripota College of Education, and of extending the number of IT laboratories in schools. I've been into some hinterland schools, and you've got the machines, the computers there, but they don't have internet connection. So overall, we hope to, by liberalizing the entire ICT sector, is to ensure that children in all schools get the opportunity to access the information superhighway. I don't think teachers or students nowadays could function without the internet. I remember when I was campaigning year before the last, I went into South Rupununi, a place called Awariwanao, and there was a big computer laboratory, but when you went, it's nothing. not even a cockroach. So we are taking the matter of the question of IT training and, of course, interconnectivity and the provision of computers very seriously. And my intention is to direct any new acquisitions from on the part of the government to teachers and to students. So that is how we're going to break in there. But I see that every single public place, every hospital, every police station, every army barracks, every school, and of course every prison will eventually have the opportunity to access the internet. So we will start in the public sector, and we expect that the private sector will follow suit.
Okay, thank you.
Stacy.
Thank you. Mr. President, something that has been on my mind, and I'm sure it's on a few parents' minds. In terms of students, these opportunities are being created, but at the, let's say, the primary level, there are some students there that are a bit slower than the others. And while, you know, we would want to say we have trained teachers who can spot the different learning, should I say, disabilities among these students, it's not always possible in the public school system. And given your administration's drive to empower youths and so forth, are there any immediate or long-term plans to have some kind of school facility for students who, maybe at the primary level, I would say, who are not so inclined to follow the normal pattern of the education system? They're a bit slower, they need more training, maybe in literacy, and they have other talents. Some of them are more focused on art and so forth, because we know that right now autism, Guyanese were not really open to identifying children with autism, or they might be on certain part of the spectrum. Are there any immediate plans by your administration to cater for those group of students who might be creative in other ways but just cannot follow through the normal education system?
Well, I agree with you that there are students who are slower, but you also made an important point there. Some are differently abled in the sense not of being physically handicapped, but they have less interest in the conventional subjects, you know, languages and so on. And we see in the results of the examinations published yesterday that our performance in mathematics is not very good. The government has got to have an eye to the future and must do more to encourage, rather than leave it to the students themselves or the parents, do more to encourage young people into the world of science. And in that regard, I would say that we need to see a different approach to persons who don't have the aptitude for the subjects you mentioned, but by providing more practical instruction centers, more technical institutes, more opportunities to go into the world of science, and I think you'll see people take off. So it is for the government to provide more opportunities in those technical fields, vocational fields, scientific fields. And this has been announced before. I've made this clear. I think the Minister of Education has made it clear that we need to start at the level of the Civil Potter College of Education to give more teachers the opportunity to go into the science field. Let me tell you a story. I don't want to be too long-winded. But I went to a secondary school which at that time had the best laboratories in the entire country. And many of my classmates who were growing up, going into geography, going into history, going into the languages, by the time they hit what we used to call ordinary levels, now you call CSEC, CSEC, they started to move into the science field. And most of the scientists in Guyana at the time of independence had come out of those laboratories. So in answer to your question, I would say you give the schools the laboratories in botany, in chemistry, in physics, in biology, in zoology, and you will see this country take off. And those students who seem not to have the aptitude, you'll see how well they perform. So my approach and the government's approach is to provide the facilities, and I'm sure that the children will. You will be surprised at the speed at which children pick up on the internet. Sometimes they're showing their parents and the grandparents how to operate it. So this is what the government needs to do. This is what the government needs to do. Provide the opportunities, and it must start at Sierra Pata College of Education. So when those teachers go into Waramadan, go into Kaikan, go into Anai and other parts of the country, it will develop a momentum among the students. So that's my answer. More vocational training, more scientific training, more technological training at the level of Sierra Pata.
Thank you.
We have time for one more question before we move into the second segment of the program.
Okay, well, I have one here. It seems that a lot of students who graduate the University of Guyana, they have difficulty finding employment that can remunerate them according to their skill set, and they oftentimes end up leaving the country. So what does the government plan to keep qualified? What does the government plan to do to keep qualified individuals from leaving?
Well, in my view, I wouldn't agree with your cause and effect because we are aware from statistics that maybe as many as 80% of graduates leave the country, not because they can't find jobs here, because they intend to find jobs somewhere else. So I don't think there's a push factor, there's a pull factor because of the salaries paid. The first question that Vin asked is about the potential of SLED. And I would say that we have not provided for sufficient openings for young people to be self-employed. And I think this is what SLED has done. What we've seen in the papers in recent days, people are complaining about coconut water being imported, plantain chips being imported. These are products that members of the SLED graduating team had on display. Huge bags of plantain chips. And if we could get those items marketed, people will stay. You can get a degree in technology or science or anything, and you can go into manufacturing.
Yeah.
And the role of organizations like SLED or facilities like SLED is to provide finance, provide training, so that young people, regardless of what they study, could see a future in manufacturing. So I would say that we're singing from the same song sheet here. Our government's task is to help young people to see opportunities in agro-processing, and we can, through organizations like LEN and SLED, provide microfinancing. So if somebody wants a little $200,000 or $250,000 to start up, it's there. And he or she goes into packaging or bottling or producing some pepper sauce or something. And we'll be able to get an entrepreneurial class developing. So right here in Guyana, I don't think people have to migrate. But if you want to simply sit at the desk and shuffle papers. But what I saw on Monday was an eye-opener. There are young people who want to go on the street, sell stuff, make money, and be happy. That's what I saw.
All right, thank you.
Thank you, sir. Moving now to the second segment of the program, where the President will take questions on any topical matter. Allow me to start, sir. We continue to see a high incidence of interpersonal violence in the country. And most often, these lead to fatality. Most recently, we saw a 14-year-old girl found dead on the East Coast, and a 13-year-old boy was shot to death, I think somewhere in Berbice. How do we as a country, how do we tackle this issue?
This is a big problem, but it is soluble. I think we need to understand causation. How did this thing happen? In my view, part of the problem is the fact that for the first decade of this century, we underwent violence which previous decades have never seen before. It was prolonged, it was vicious, and many of the children who were 4 or 5 years old in 2000 are now 20 or 21 years old. They never had the training to resolve problems, to discuss, to settle conflict. And they saw violence and they are behaving in a violent manner. And I would call that the secondary impact. the first impact, the primary impact is when murders occurred. But this is a secondary impact, in which people who saw this violence are now perpetrating violence. That is a big part of the problem. The other part of the problem, I think, is that within families, within communities, we need to develop a culture of sharing, of conflict resolution, of sport, of participation in cultural activities, song, poetry, dance. So young people can feel part of a community. Right now, there is too much confrontation. There's too much conflict. And some young people cannot, even older people, don't have the means of dealing with it. Even sometimes they go into the hinterland in gold mining areas, they're traveling on a minibus, and they simply don't seem to have the tools to resolve conflict. They go to a wedding. These are friends. They drink a lot of alcohol, and somebody ends up being stabbed. So in the home, a father comes home, and the food is cold, you know, and people, the type of violence you see, cutting off people's hands, you know, stabbing a girlfriend 18 times. So we need to understand the causes of violence. And secondly, we need to go back into the homes, into the mandirs, into the churches, into the masjids, into the communities, and deal with these problems at source. And teach people new ways, non-conflictual ways of resolving interpersonal differences. So when people get married, they can sit down and solve the problems. And if the problems are insoluble, walk away from the marriage. Don't stay there and burn down the house and, you know, chop up your wife. You know, so we need to understand there is a problem in Guyanese society. It started years ago, and I put the start of this problem in the troubles that occurred in the first decade of this century when we had that drug war. And we shan't sweep it under the carpet. That's why I've committed the government to investigate the crimes that took place there. Even a matter like the assassination of a minister not being investigated. So people just say, hey, you can assassinate a minister and not be held accountable. That is the attitude which has led to the situation we have at present. And it has permeated not only you know, the public sphere, but it has gone into families. So we see interpersonal violence as something which can be solved, and our government intends to deal with it through interventions at those various levels, at the school, in the religious houses, in non-governmental organizations, and definitely in the families. But we need to understand there is a problem, first of all.
Yes, sir. Stacy.
Yes, Mr. President. Coming off of the topic of interpersonal violence, another issue that continues to affect the Guyanese society, suicide. Just over the last weekend or so, we see a number of persons, maybe about 3 of them, I think my news entity reported on, I think 1 or 2 in Essequibo and another in New Amsterdam, where persons, I think a 17-year-old young lady also took her life. What are some of the steps? I mean, interpersonal violence and other issues could be contributing to people taking their own lives. What are some other factors you believe may be affecting persons, and could we also mull on the idea of tackling this same issue of suicide, just like interpersonal violence, in the school, from the school level? Because one of the cases, maybe a few weeks back, the young lady said her mother died the reports from the families that the child's mother died in a fire a few years ago, and she kept telling members of the family, friends, that she's feeling so depressed by this loss, and no one seemed to take it to a next level, maybe counseling or so forth. Are there any plans to start tackling this, I guess, from younger? Because we hear even younger children saying, I would just kill myself. I mean, little things to us, but we don't know the effect.
Well, it's a very complex phenomenon because we are doing studies now. We are aiming at decriminalizing suicide and regarding it as something that could be resolved if the proper measures are implemented. For example, if there are signs of depression, and if there are other examples in the community. Sometimes you see clusters in particular communities. You see several persons over a period of time taking their lives. They feel that that is the way. Some communities are not bothered by suicide at all, but other communities display a high susceptibility to suicide. So there could be the copycat element there. But in addition to that, we need to see what is taking place in families, what is causing this depression or alienation. So we need to see what is taking place in children, what they're seeing in that little device, that little BlackBerry, and ask, whether adults could intervene earlier. And that's why I came back in the previous question we did with the interpersonal violence to looking at the community. I am convinced if those children had the opportunity to go to plays or participate in plays or drama or dance or choirs, to go into sport, they would realize that they are not forgotten, they're not isolated, they're not by themselves, but they are part of a group, part of a team. And they would have a greater will to live. And I have not done a study of the suicide cases, but I have asked for studies to be done. And this is being dealt with by both the Ministry of Public Health and Ministry of Public Security. And we hope that by mid next year we could have more definitive investigations and answers to these questions. But in many areas along the coast, from Region 2, Pomeroon, Superdam, right through to East Berbice, Quarantine, and even some hinterland communities. It's more rare in the hinterland, but it's still prevalent too. So we need to find causation first before we could apply solutions. But I am confident that, with a greater emphasis on community life and cultural life, we will be able to overcome those problems. The culture of the country is important. And as I said a little earlier, if our culture is one of violence that we saw during that drug war between 2002 and 2010, you'll find a lot of people who don't want to go on, but I think the tide is turning and people are looking forward to that good life.
Norman, your question.
Yes, now, if I could just shift focus for a bit.
Keep shifting.
Yeah. Sir, across the world, in certain countries, there seems to be a paradigm shift of consciousness, if you will. People are becoming more aware and they're asking some really tough questions. Questions that challenge our fundamental beliefs of what we've been taught our entire lives. And every day we're seeing more and more research coming forth that support those arguments. And even some industries have been popping up recently and a lot of research into the science of this. You'll see what I mean by that just now. My question to you is, where do you and your administration stand on the legalization and or decriminalization of marijuana? If not completely legalized, do you think that it's time that the penalty for possession and use of be reduced?
We are moving in that direction. This is a decision that the cabinet has yet to make. We are awaiting advice and recommendations from the Ministry of Public Health. As you know, we moved ahead on tobacco already, the Ministry of Public Health and also the Ministry of Public Security. I would say, even running the risk of talking out of school, that it is likely that the private use of marijuana will be given consideration in months to come. Decriminalization is something else, and that's not on the cards at present. But there is a possibility that when the matter comes before us, we would want to have a good debate on whether a person should be sent to jail, give him a custodial sentence for a possession of such a small quantity of marijuana that it is clear is only for personal use and not for trafficking. Trafficking is not likely to be removed from our books in the near future, but certainly the use of marijuana is likely to be decriminalized. But I don't want to talk about the turn, and we're still in discussions, and a definitive answer will not be given until Cabinet has a chance to look at it, and of course it has to go to the National Assembly.
Yeah. Okay, thank you.
Stacy.
So that's your paradigm shift.
Yeah, it's
But don't try till you hear the law change. Right?
yes. I'm cool.
Yes, Mr. Granger. Moving into politics. Recently, there was the appointment of Zana Frank, Ms. Zana Frank, as the Deputy Registrar of Deeds. Now, the Attorney General, he raised some concerns with that because he said the government might be moving a little bit swiftly to adjust the law in the sense that the Judicial Service Commission is given the power to appoint the registrar and deputy registrar. But what the AG is reasoning is that this recent appointment, the young lady did not meet the criteria, the qualifications created by the said JSC for the position when there were other persons. But he does not have that power because of how the law is written. He doesn't have that power. But he said that was changed sometime, I think, in the 2002 time frame. So he said it was not in the initial 1960 Constitution. So government might be moving to rectify that because it's only the Judicial Service Commission that is given that power to appoint registrar, deputy registrar. What are your thoughts on that scenario?
Well, we will be advised by the Attorney General in due course. The matter has not come before Cabinet as yet, and I think any comment on my part will be premature. As you know, in most Western jurisdictions, there's a line between the judiciary, which is one branch, and the executive, which is another branch, and of course the legislative is the third branch of government. What the Attorney General has pointed to is the fact that there is a blurring of the line between the judicial branch and the executive branch. And he has raised the matter. It hasn't come before Cabinet. I don't want to comment on the appointment of a particular person. It is up to the JSC to examine her qualifications to see whether they satisfy the criteria which have been laid down. Of course, I don't think there's any mechanism for voiding the appointment if the person, if the actual appointment is flawed. But when the Attorney General brings the matter before Cabinet, if it requires a change in the law, and we feel that that is a more efficient way of governing the country, we will proceed in that direction. But right now, I don't want to comment on Ms. Frank or the arguments which have been advanced by the former Attorney General and the present Attorney General. So let's leave it at that point for the time being, if you don't mind.
No problem. Thank you.
I think we have time for one more question.
All right, moving into popular culture. So right now there's a certain craze that's taking the entire world by storm. And even right here in Guyana, mostly among our young people. Have you ever heard of Pokemon Go?
I heard about it, sure, from my grandson, yes.
Yes, do you have any idea what that is about?
No, I haven't had reason to confront the phenomenon, no.
Okay, well, if I may, can I just give you a brief explanation?
Yes.
Well, Pokemon Go is an app game. It was released about a month ago worldwide. And basically the objective of the game is it uses augmented reality. That is, it takes your phone's camera, you point it at anywhere in the environment, and little creatures called Pokemon pop up. And it's your duty as the player to catch them. Now, the interesting thing about this game is that it uses the entire world, the environment we live around us, as your play field. And there are specific locations on the map, or Map Guyana, that correlate with places of interest. Like, for instance, the 1763 monument is now called a Pokestop. And players gather there every day to catch Pokemon and to play. And also, there's something interesting as well. It has been said that it has so much potential to aid local businesses and economies as well, because stories keep popping up of how Pokemon has helped failing businesses get back on their feet because their stores and their locations have ended up being Pokestops, and there's a massive influx of players going there to catch Pokemon. And while they're there, they might just buy something and support the business as well. And also, if I may, there are rare Pokemon that can only be found in certain locations. And there's one specific Pokemon that is unique to Guyana, and it has been created here. It's called Mew, but you probably wouldn't know about it. But it has been said that it has the possibility of improving tourism because it can attract players from around the world to our country. So what do you think about that?
Well, I'd be very happy to do anything that advances the economy of Guyana, and I would suggest that Eurocram would be such a place. I would love to see students from Bristol University and University of the West Indies and students from the University of Guyana all assembling at Eurocram to see the beauties of this country.
Yes.
So I've got a lot to sell about there. I can sell some Arapaima, I can sell some Jaguars and Harpy Eagles. So let's use it to advance Guyana's economic interests. I haven't heard about it. Of course, if you see a president playing that too often, you want to know who's running the shop.
Ask your grandson to show you it.
Yeah, yeah,
Yes.
maybe I must ask him, must get some advice from him. But from your description, thank you very much
Yes.
for introducing me. It's the first exposure that I've had to it. I would say that it could advance Guyana's interest, particularly Guyana, as I said, Guyana and Suriname together are bigger than Germany, and I would like to see a lot more tourists coming in. So if we can have more of those sites, I'd be the happiest president in the Western Hemisphere.
Okay, thank you, sir.
And on that note, we'll bring the program to an end. Thank you, Mr. President, for taking this half hour out of your schedule to be with us. And thank you, Stacy and Norman, for being here today. Thank you, viewers, for watching. Join us again next week.